This apparently is the largest venue either of them has ever played, so that's exciting for them. We're going to talk about the making of this show, how it came to be. You know their work from so many important projects they've done in the past, Sheryl's music, Barry's movies. The idea of them coming together in this way as a creative force is very exciting, and the fact that Signature is their home for the debut of this musical is, of course, very gratifying and happy-making for Washington's theater community. So thank you for doing that for us.
Great to be here.
This is the first time seeing it. This is the set? Is this what we see at the beginning of the show?
Well, I hope it is.
Oh, okay.
Because that'll be very embarrassing if it comes out and it's something different.
It's a great looking set. I just want to say, we will be taking some questions later in the program. If you want to submit questions, and this looks like a very Twitter-savvy audience, I know, you can tweet them to @SigDiner, @SigTheater, sorry, @SigTheater with the hashtags post POV or SigDiner. Everybody got that?
Oh my gosh.
I of course screwed that up.
I do not know how to tweet even.
Cheryl, I get tweets from you all the time. I get so excited when
I do know how to tweet.
Yeah. When I get a Sheryl Crow tweet, I get excited. I go, Cheryl, she's tweeting to me.
I have this great nanny who I'll like text her and say, can you Twitter something? She's like, no, it's tweet.
Okay, so I'm getting tweets from Sheryl Crow's nanny. That I've learned that.
I'm afraid that's true.
At the outset. So we want to know how this all came to be, obviously, and maybe you can give us a sense. But first of all, I'm just curious, what's it like to be sort of ensconced in Shirlington, in Arlington County, Virginia, putting together your world premiere musical? What has this been like, this experience? Barry?
Well, first of all, I rented a car, which I have never used, because this little community, so I go from the apartment and have something to eat, and then you walk here, and then you walk to the, like the Starbucks thing, and then you walk to the, this restaurant to that restaurant, and you go back to the apartment. So it's been fascinating in this 2-week period of working on the show and wandering around, in this little kind of community, and it keeps you very focused, I think, in terms of what we're doing, because it's an enormous amount of hours, because we'll meet like 11 in the morning and you start to work, and then in the afternoon they'll start to work on some of the songs, and we go back and forth and the scenes, etc. And this cast and the musicians and our interaction is a real concentrated period, which I find really fascinating.
It's like being at an Olympic, what do they call it? Olympic campus, Olympic...
the Olympic Village?
The Olympic Village, yes.
Oh, that's interesting. I've talked to a lot of people from, creative people from out of town. They always go, it's this strange little 3 blocks of urbanity in the middle of interstates. What is this? And I always say, did you ever see the old TV show The Prisoner? Which they created a little town around Patrick McGoohan. That's what sort of, they've really created a town around this theater. That's kind of what it is, so you can go to the restaurants and stuff.
Yes.
So how did you two come together? You come from such different backgrounds, essentially, in the entertainment world, in the world of film, in the world of music. Mm-hmm. How did this happen?
Do you remember?
I do. I remember. I got a phone call from Barry. Actually, my manager said, hey, you're going to get a call from Barry Levinson. And I was like, yes! Finally, I'm going to be an actress! But anyway, he called me and said, I would really like to take Diner to the stage and adapt it to a musical. And I've said this before, and I know that he's not insulted by it, but I said, I would love to do it, but how in the world? Because nothing happens in Diner. Like, nobody gets killed, nobody, it's like, where's the half going to be? And but it's been the most exciting process, and one of the great things about my first phone call with Barry and every conversation I've had with him since is that he referenced my music. Like, he had all these different songs that he felt like were appropriate to to this particular scene or that particular scene, and the cadence of things, and the style of different songs I'd written, and like obscurities, and I know you guys are familiar with the movie. The music in the movie is actually a character in and of itself. It's its own entity. I mean, it's a very important part of the movie. But when I've gotten stuck as we've gone along, I'll text Barry or I'll call him, and it will feel like he's going in a completely to a non sequitur, and he'll just mention some song that he happened to be listening to that's by somebody. And I'll think, why is he talking to me about that? And later on, I'll listen to it, and it'll be like, it's just like a weird. He is such a. I'm talking about you like you're not here, but such a great. He knows so many songs. He's such a music lover that for me, as the author of the music, it's just been extremely joyful to get to not only work with him and work with such rich characters, but to be around somebody who just loves music, is nostalgic about music, and who has such a great thrill when he discovers things on YouTube or whatever. And that, for a musician, that's just, I mean, you couldn't ask for a better situation, really.
Everybody does know the movie. We're all familiar with the movie. I just want to make sure that there's some... Set in 1959 among a group of friends in Baltimore, really drawn on Barry's own memories of that time.
Yeah, more or less.
With an original cast that has gone on to glory. It was Barry's first movie, and the cast included Kevin Bacon, Steve Guttenberg, Daniel Stern. I mean, it's one after another. Ellen Barkin. I mean, everybody was the start. Mickey Rourke. The start of everybody's career.
Tim Daly.
Who?
Tim Daly.
Tim Daly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Paul Reiser.
Tim Daly, Paul Reiser, and small. Everybody, it was everybody's starting point. What, Barry? You're picking up the phone. You're asking Sheryl Crow to write a musical. What made you think this story that Sheryl Crow says nothing happens in was a musical?
Well, the thing was, as I said, Sheryl in the beginning, I said, I've done the film, so it's not like we have to protect the film. The film is the film. Mm-hmm. The one element that could change the dynamic and lead to the music is the fact that in the film we follow the guys, and so, but in this, at times the guys will leave and say the female character is there, and then her, basically at times, her thoughts, feelings, or whatever opens the door for the music. And so in Diner the Musical, we see the female point of view, the frustrations, the anger of, in a sense, being caught in a time when they couldn't do females couldn't do some of the things they wanted to do. It was just on the edge of the feminist movement. So a lot of those elements can start to happen when you rethink it, and then to be able to open the door in terms of the female voice. And so I think that is where this expands out from where the film is.
We say in the theater very often in musicals, people speak, but when they sing because they have no other choice. They have to sing. At that moment in a show, they just have no other choice. What made you guys think these characters needed to sing? Was it out? It sounds like to me the entry point really was the women who felt maybe were holding so much back that they needed to.
Well, that was one of the elements to explore, and I think that's where we first talked about that in the very early goings. And then the other thing was not to necessarily sing about, like someone said, oh, so you're going to do the football test song.
Right.
You know what I mean?
There is one, I hope.
And there is a song, but it's
God.
not...
You'll have to come see.
It's not based on the football quiz.
It's not.
It takes
I see.
another step
But there
past it.
is a song about the Popcorn. No, I'm kidding.
So
I wanted to write that one about the penis in the popcorn box was the one I wanted to write about. Justin Timberlake had already done that.
So we don't go into the test room either in the musical. Is that also? I mean, I'm not asking for like spoilers here, but is that not?
No, it's part of it. I mean, that particular scene, not that we conclude a lot of scenes from the film, but that particular sequence exists, and it stays true to the actual test of it, but what's around it allows it to become, musicalized. But Eddie's not singing questions.
Right. It's not an opera.
Yeah.
It's not opera where every line is. Yeah. Had you always wanted to do a musical?
No. That's the short answer. No, it never occurred to me until one day. And I have to try to say this in a way, is that I love live stage. It fascinates me because, as opposed to a film, you're seeing characters actually doing things and you can get caught up in it. And certain musicals I've seen, I'm just blown away by. And then there are other kinds of musicals where I just sort of like stare at it. And I don't know how to relate to it musically. I keep wondering, what is this? And I just suddenly, zone out to, it's a song here. A song's taking place, but I don't necessarily connect. But when it works, it's an extraordinary experience. And so when this began to come about, and then talking to Sheryl, and I'll never forget getting she sent me, an MP3 of a song that she was working on. She says, "What do you think about this? Listen to," and then all of a sudden, Sheryl is working, and I go, "Oh." I mean, it was really thrilling. I played it for my wife, Diana. I said, "Listen to this. Sheryl has this song. It takes place where?" And I'd explain where it was going to be, and now this person sings it, and it was like, this is really exciting.
Sheryl, I don't want to. We have written. The Post has stories coming out about both Sheryl and Barry within possibly minutes. I have not possibly minutes. Later this week, but they'll both be in the Sunday paper. I'm looking at an editor who's nodding. Okay, they'll both be in the Sunday paper. But Sheryl, what was your introduction to musicals? Did you follow them all your life? I mean, where was this born for you?
Well, I grew up in a family, a very close-knit family. My parents are still married. They 69 years. They were in a swing band when I was a kid. And my siblings and I would sleep on the stairs outside the living room when they'd all come home smoking and drinking, and they'd bring their instruments, or they'd play and sing to the Magnavox. And it was a very ideal way to grow up, and I assume that every other kid grew up that way. So I was introduced to amazing music from very, very early on. And obviously TV was different then. There was no cable, so a lot of those song and dance movies were on TV from Oklahoma, around holiday time, and really otherwise, but Oklahoma, West Side Story was a huge favorite. Anything Gene Kelly was in, I think I probably told you, I loved Gene Kelly so much that when I was maybe 9, I wrote him a letter after singing Brigadoon and just said, "Please, wait for me. I'm going to grow up," and about a year later, I got a signed autograph picture from somebody at the studio.
It's in the story.
It is. I still have it. But so I grew up just loving show tunes, loving the fantasy of people breaking into song and dance, and I loved melody. I grew up listening to everything from Cole Porter to Burt Bacharach to every show tune to James Taylor to ultimately all the people that wound up influencing me. So getting the opportunity to do this was, I just was thrilled. I told Barry that after I got an outline of how to get started, like what scenes might be appropriate to have song, I sat up one night and wrote 5 songs. I was just so inspired and energized by these characters. I mean, for one thing, we feel like we know the characters because I for one was a big fan of the movie when it came out, but I watched it a few times after that as well. And once we sort of cracked the code about who the women were, and not just necessarily as counterparts to the men, but what they represented were in the times as they were changing, from the 50s woman in the kitchen to the unrest of wanting to have a life and not just being a mother, to all these things were happening in Diner that were sort of in the shadows of what was happening with these young men as they were kind of buckling against change, and getting the opportunity to really explore that on stage with the freedom of using what was so brilliant about the movie and getting to expand and, you know, grow with that. It's a great writing assignment. I've loved the assignment of writing in the voice of these great, rich people.
I recently spoke to Sting, not to drop a name, but and he was winning a Kennedy Center honor.
I spoke to him too recently.
Oh, good for you. Anyway.
I'm kidding.
And in speaking to him, you know, he said that, you know, in his house, your contemporaries, basically, in the north of England, they played Rodgers and Hammerstein, Carousel. I mean, you know, the music that was the music of my childhood, and yours too. I wonder, what is this happening? Is there something, is this childhood flooding back for singers and songwriters who move into other genres and whose audiences might even think maybe it's a little corny to go to pursue musical theater? Not that I think that, but I'm curious about the pivot back to this form that informed you as a kid, and that, I mean, you really didn't consider for a long, long time. Is it an emotional connection that you make to this form?
Well, first I would say that I don't know, I bet you would not find one actor who did not want to get on a stage and sing. And for instance, Kathleen tonight is at Rob Marshall's. Her brother is the director of Into the Woods. And I bet everybody in Hollywood wanted to be in that. And just like with Chicago and a lot of these other musicals that have been made into movies, I just know that as a kid, when I sat in front of Oklahoma or any of these, I mean, particularly West Side Story for me was a game changer. And I'm sure Barry, being a director, would attest to this. When you watch a scene and there is a moving piece of music behind it, it really causes the molecules to change. It causes you to have an emotional experience that you might not have just watching a scene with no music under it. And watching two people singing their stories, it's delicious, you know. You just are sucked into it when it's done right, when it's, you know, done in
There's also a
way.
change, I think. I mean, this is my own theory, in terms of pop music, what's taken place. Because pop music, a lot of the stuff that you wrote is storytelling songs. You know, how you feel about this, etc., whatever, and you'll hear it in Burt Bacharach. You would hear it in all of that, and whether it was in Springsteen, he was telling stories, etc. That, you know, they were storytellers, and that musical landscape has radically changed. So almost in the terms, if you want to write and tell stories, because that's not going to disappear, we gravitate to storytelling. That's what always, in the end of the day, we lock in on. And right now, that's not happening in the music business. It will again at some point. And so therefore you say, well, in a musical, then you can get to storytelling again. You're telling these mini stories throughout the course of it that are supporting the overall, you know, piece. And that's just my theory of, you know, that's where the change in music is.
Well, and also at that time, I Could Have Danced All Night was like a #1 hit. You know, it was the musical theater that was creating the popular music.
There were bells on the hills, but I never heard them singing. I mean, the Beatles covered songs from Carousel.
Could you sing a little more, Sheryl, please? Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. That's exactly right.
Make sure in Twitter that you heard me sing.
So that's a shift, I think.
And was it that? Was it? Were you a Sheryl Crow fan, Barry? I mean, was that how you thought of Sheryl?
Well, you know, I've listened to her a lot of her stuff. That's why in the first conversation we had, I mentioned some various songs that you know, that literally, you know, hadn't been written, would be perfect for, and I would mention a scene.
Huh.
You know, and so, you know, we were talking about that stuff, you know, because in there, in those various songs, you can hear all of these stories. And so that was, you know, one of the elements. I mean, music is, as Sheryl said, music in Diner is important, but it's the source music that's feeding and impacting on it. So here, you're taking this, you know, that you're shifting it, but you're hearing, for instance, you know, the guy's frustrations, the female frustrations, the happier moments, the darker moments, all of those things in terms of our behavior. I mean, Diner is, in the end of the day, is really about human emotions, in a sense, in this 5-day period of these various characters. You know, and many of those things are consistent today, you know, in terms of marriages, how do we deal with one another? In terms of dating, you know, how do we deal with one another? When do we overstep our boundaries? When do we not understand? How often we never talk straight ahead between a male and a female about what's really going on. It's always going sideways. It never deals specifically with it. That's why, you know, that's the language of Diner, is all sideways talk. And it creates its own humor. At the same time, it's really drama, because we don't deal with subjects straight on with this kind of clarity, you know. And so that's why you know, and then you apply it to music, and you get, I think, what we're, you know, striving for.
Is there also a political element of Diner now that didn't exist then? I mean, when you introduce the idea, I mean, the women in that movie all seemed so frustrated in one way or another. They all seem so stifled, except for maybe Barbara. Barbara was working at the
station,
but there was limits placed on them, whereas the boys felt like life was opening up for them, and the women, they felt like life was closing down for them. And I wondered if that was also part of, maybe if you're writing this musical today, you have to acknowledge the politics, you know, that
we do, and it is part of it. Because I mean, Barbara was a feminist, you know, she worked in the television, she was the feminist before the feminist movement. You know, she may not know that, but I would like to do this. I would like to work in television. The reality is very few women, like it says there are very few women. I'm the only one that's actually, she's an assistant director. All the others are secretaries or phone operators. She was the only one. And so she doesn't even understand her place. She just knows where she wants to go, and she understands how some people are going to be resentful of the fact that there's now a female moving into what was once an exclusive man's world.
Sheryl, did you relate to these women? You know, they you know, Ellen Barkin played this very sort of poignant character in the movie who's in a bad marriage to a guy who doesn't really get her, and will latch on to even another guy who isn't particularly right for her either, just to have an experience bigger than herself. Could you relate? I mean, you've had this career that sort of has, you know, you've gotten to pick and choose your route. Could you relate to the?
Well, I think there's aspects, for me, there's aspects in all three women that exist, I think, probably in all women. My mom got married when she was 19. She is still the most unbelievable singer. Her voice has only gotten richer, and a fine artist, and I think she would like to have been an artist, but she got married because that's what you did, and then you started to have kids, and she's 30 and has 4 kids, and I have 2 kids, and I can't imagine doubling that. And what that must feel like to wake up every day with somebody you've now been with for 10 years and be worrying about, you know, how much laundry there is and what you're going to feed the kids next, and nobody in the house they're never all happy at the same time. And so you know, all these women in this musical I think all of us women in some ways relate to. There's Barbara who aspires to be something more than just a mom, and she finds herself being forced into being a mom by virtue of a mistake. I'm a working mom, and yeah, I didn't get married, and I look at that and think, well, I did choose work. And so there's just, you know, these women really represent, I think, the aspect of time and choice and the humanity that exists in all of our experiences, the choices that you make, what's expected of you, what you expect of yourself, and also this idea of the dreams that you have and how to navigate once those dreams start fading. And, that's what I get from all of the experiences of all the characters in the movie. You know, you have all these young men too who are getting ready to embark not only on a future, but a future that's very uncertain with going into the 60s. And of becoming men and what's expected of them. You got one guy who's getting ready to get married just because he thinks he's gone with a girl for 3 years, and you get married. So it's, you know, I think the stories that exist with all the characters are age-old stories that still exist. They're all the questions that we still ask ourselves. It's a pretty timeless piece, but it's interesting in that there was such a huge shift from the 50s to the 60s that we all know of. The 60s really did, I think, redefine who men and women were, and stereotypically.
And you don't see and you don't understand the future. You know what I mean? There's no way that you can figure out the future. In other words, I'll never forget, and I was watching it one time, there was this clip from the 39 World's Fair. It's talking about the future. And it said, you know, the future house is so-and-so, da-da-da-da. And in the kitchen, you'll have this and this and this. And when mom goes to cook, and it showed mom in the future still with an apron, and you know this thing, and she's and you know in an apron or whatever. But it's the future. But mom didn't change.
Right. That's right. Yeah,
mom's not changing for the future.
Yeah. That's
mom's got to stay where she is.
Yeah.
And then you take
right.
and then take it
it's
now.
True.
And then you have to talk about it on a human level, how you see things now. And I remember this conversation. And this was in the 50s, the first time we began to hear about cigarettes and cancer and the connection. And we were starting to smoke. And this is the sensibility of a kid. You go, well, you know, yeah, the cancer or whatever. You say, well, yeah, but, you know, everybody gets a cancer, they're in their 50s. You know, they're in the 50s. You know, when you get cancer from cigarettes. So we're like, you know, we're 17, you know, so we got a long time. By then they will have found the cure for cancer. Right. That's the way we would have thought of it. Oh yeah, they'll correct that. You know.
Yeah.
So
we oppose the values of today on tomorrow.
Yeah,
basically.
and we don't understand. So if anyone would have said, and no one predicted that the 60s that we would engage in a war that would last for 10 years, that had devastating effects, that presidents would be killed, you know, assassinated, this, and you know, you can go through a list of all of these things, and no one predicted that. But we predicted, you know, that we might have a rocket that could get to the moon, but not the
social fabric.
The social. That is not ever figured out, and so each generation deals with going along and a blindness to what's going to happen.
I remember going, I'm this old, to the 1964 World's Fair, and the GE Pavilion was a spinning a thing into the future, and in each scenario, as we went farther into the future, it was always, the thing that changed was the stove. And the woman was always in front of a newfangled stove.
That's it.
Yeah, that was the constant.
Yeah.
Because it's exactly what you're describing, which was that, you know, we are going to be who we were then in 2090.
Yep.
Yeah, that's really interesting. How did you assimilate each other's style here? You know, was this a thing where you sat in a room together and pounded this out? And by the way, how many years had you been working on this? I'm still fact
Just a
checking my
couple of
story.
weeks.
No,
No, it was 1989.
Exactly.
it was like
The
2000.
year I graduated, I started working on Diner.
Well, actually, speaking of graduating, you started as a music teacher.
I was a music teacher.
Barry, you started as an actor.
But no,
right?
actually, I started. That was one of the things along the way. I mean, I was in an acting school,
Okay.
which led to stand-up because I was trying to make money. That led to writing. That led to that.
So there were these, I mean, you both had, the art sort of was always sort of embryonically, there from the beginning. But how did you know that you could work together, and how did you work together over this 16 years you've been putting this project together?
Well, for one thing that really informed how I wrote music was the fact that this thing is set in the last 5 days of 1959, and we had a lot of conversations about it. Initially, I had the script, and I sat around for about 6 months, and finally called our then producer and said, "I have no idea what I'm doing. How do
You had the
people,
movie script.
Yeah, how do people do this?" And then so Barry made up an outline, and that was the night after I got that. I was like, "Oh, okay." And but one of the things that really about the movie that I was talking about, that it was such a strong character, is that it is the music from 1959. If you go to the Hot 100 or the Billboard charts and look at what's on there, it is a very there's a wide array of styles on there. So there were parameters. I wasn't going to be able to just sit down and write a bunch of pop tunes that sound like Sheryl Crow, nor would I have wanted to. But I used to joke around with Barry. Every time I'd hang out with Barry, he's so knowledgeable about music, and he's also wickedly funny, and just fun to be around. I would always say, he's like my best girlfriend. He would always walk in looking really dapper, and I'd be like, "Oh, where'd you get those shoes?" And just just fun to be around. And I did call him a lot at night, or even texted him a lot, and I would say, "Well, what do you think if we went in this?" Or I'd say, just talk to me about some things that come to mind about this, and I'd be quiet on the phone, and I'd just let him talk, and I would just make notes, and then that would really set me on my way. And he has a nice way of, when he speaks, of it just being poetic and funny and just inspiring my process, at least.
The music of the time, so there was, everybody thinks of, oh yeah, well then the 50s was all rock and roll. And it's not. If you look at the top 100, you can look through a whole bunch of the really big hits. You say, well, Beyond the Sea was not rock and roll, Venus was not rock and roll, The Battle of New Orleans
Staggerly.
There's a huge amount of things that there's no rock and roll to it at all, and so in it, there's this eclectic where it goes from jazz to instrumentals to, it was all over the place then. It was really, we had talked about that, so it's not like everything's going to have, just that rock and roll beat. And I think the show is reflective of the different kinds of music.
But your idea was to keep it in the vernacular of the time, the musical vernacular.
And I think what's nice is that what Sheryl put together musically is it's not like one sound, and so it's all over the place, that fits, but it's not like just one sound.
Were you worried at all? I mean, was the impetus here partly, you've both established careers, very successful careers within your worlds. Was it the feeling that you just wanted to challenge yourself in a new way, to do something so out of the box that it was gonna take you somewhere? Maybe it wouldn't work, maybe it would. I mean, but we're at a point where that doesn't necessarily matter that much.
No, I mean, I wasn't thinking of it in the context of what am I doing next with my career? What's something I haven't done yet? Sometimes you just get opportunities that come to you, and you think, wow, this is something I would love to do, and you don't think about, okay, who's going to think what, or people are going to think I'm, you just don't think about it. I felt like I was equipped to do it, and that I had a rich history of understanding themes and how things work in musicals, and I just was thrilled to have the opportunity.
Just the intellectual challenge?
Yeah, and also just to be able to write music that's just melodic and that has an emotional flow through it that
Right.
just will hopefully transport people the way all the music that I've loved has done for me.
Your music is so personal so often, and you feel like we know something about you, which is, of course, what an artist wants you to feel.
That's how you get your stalkers.
Okay, yeah, I hadn't thought of it quite that way.
True.
But was this a relief to be in other people's heads for a while? To not have to like draw on.
I mean, I feel like I know these people, and I cared about what they were saying because, I just for the sake of integrity, I wanted them to be, certainly who Barry envisioned them to be, but also to be able to in a strong way be able to voice the human experience, which is what, it's what every great movie does, every great book. It gives you the feeling that someone knew you when they wrote it, or somebody was having your experience, and how could they know me this well, but then to get the opportunity to actually use my background in music and just my love of music, it's been a grand opportunity.
One of the things I loved, actually, when I visited Sheryl in Nashville, she allowed me to listen to a few of the songs, and it was actually at that moment that I understood what this collaboration possibly could do on a stage, because suddenly I understood, why would you want to have just a guy musical with another guy's voice repeating or trying to repeat Barry Levinson's voice, to take it to the point where, a woman can now say, this is a story that has...
Well, there's a line, a lyric, and you should say it because there's nothing that I can repeat from anything that I write that I say the same way. I always change it, so I don't want to change your lyrics. But in the song between Shrevey and Beth, when they have an argument and he leaves and she's frustrated in the house, Sheryl wrote a song called "Tear Down This House." She's so angry, and the line of "Shame on the mothers."
Shame on you mothers who. Shame on you mothers who. Choose wedding colors, but don't tell you what's really in store. China will shatter the...
So, it really speaks to
yes,
that
China will rattle. Yeah.
People know it already. See?
Everybody.
Actually, the production's probably up on YouTube and we don't even realize it.
Barry, did you pick Diner to musicalize? You've done a lot of movies. I'm just going to read a few of the names because it's like ridiculous. I have them here. The Natural, Tin Men, Good Morning Vietnam, Rain Man, Avalon, Bugsy, Wag the Dog, and you have a new movie we should say, The Humbling, which is a Philip Roth novel with Al Pacino playing an older actor who has an affair with a lesbian. Is that fair?
No, it's much more, that is part of it.
Okay, it's a little reductive, but that's what happens.
He's wonderful in it.
Soon to be a musical.
Soon to be a musical.
Lesbian exclamation point. Why was I asking that question? Is Diner the most personal for you? Is there a reason that this one is the one you're coming back to at this point?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. To be honest with you, I thought the very first, to me, when I was making Tin Men, there's a scene between Richard Dreyfuss and Barbara Hershey, and they have umbrellas and it's raining, and he's talking about that he likes her and etc. And during one of the takes we cut, and I said to Dreyfuss, I said, we're this far away from breaking into song. And I always thought Tin Men seemed like a natural musical, because you got guys, the early 60s, the Rat Pack, Hustlers, whatever, etc. And that seemed, when I would think about it as a musical. Now when I think about Diner, it makes sense, because it's very rich to all of the, the characters as we've talked about, and all of those things, and the inarticulate nature of how it evolves on face value doesn't seem as if it is, a musical, but I think it's been able to, make that transition.
And yet Diner is filled with music. I watched it recently.
Yeah.
It's filled with music, and there are actual musical numbers. There's a number where Eddie gets up on the rim. They go to the club. I have to remember. They goes to the club and they sing on the stage.
Yeah,
they do that whole.
It has those things in it.
Right.
That it can work that way. But the nature of it is when you think when nothing happens, when it's guys talking, but it does actually lead to things. My father, when I did it, and I was in Baltimore, and he saw the movie and he said, "I thought you said you were going to write it." I said, "I did." He said, "It sounded like everybody made up their own stuff." I said, "But that was the point of it." I said, "But nobody will know you wrote it." And so,
Did those guys? Did they exist?
well, I sort of took parts of a lot of them. There was a Boogie, and he was as is sort of portrayed in a lot of ways. He did become, of all of those guys, had become incredibly successful in business. And in clothing stores, and had hundreds of clothing stores. And so, as unlikely as it seems, that he did really well. And so he is one of the characters. And then the other ones, I mixed in people. Because my cousin Eddie did give his wife to be a football test. And the interesting thing is, it's not quite as we do it, but he said to me, he said, Barry, I saw the movie 5 times, and I realized it was a mistake to give my wife a football test.
5 times.
And I said, "Really?" And his answer was, "Yeah, because 2 weeks after we're married, she cannot remember one question." And that was the reason, not the fact that it was a crazy thing to do, but
Right.
that was his
That's
take
hilarious.
on it.
That's great.
So I took things that I remembered, and tried to find a way to bring that into the sensibilities of that time, and that short time frame of 5 days, the last 5 days of 1959.
I don't remember who I was talking about with the other day, but the interesting thing about Diner to me is that Diner was really, to me, the precursor to Seinfeld and Curb Your Enthusiasm and all these shows that we love, that are basically people having conversations. That's how you get to know them and about what's going on in their experiences, is their conversations and their relationships with each other. And before Diner, there really wasn't anything like that. There weren't comedies where there wasn't...
No, where they didn't just talk small talk.
Yeah.
Small talk.
and reveal themselves through it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that didn't happen. Which is, as a kid, this sounds silly and in many ways, but it's what sometimes we pick up as being little that you don't realize until way later in life is informative. Because when I was a kid and had the television, they used to have these live shows, and Marty was on, which was later made into a thing, and Patty Chayefsky wrote it. And I was a little kid, and I didn't really understand what it was all about. But the thing that I remembered, and as a kid I walked around saying it over and over again, there was a little line in it that said, "What do you want to do, Marty?" "I don't know, Angie, what do you want to do?" And I thought that was the most amazing thing I'd ever heard. And I would walk around, in the house, and I go, "What do you want to do tonight, Marty?" "I don't know, Angie, what do you want to do?" I'm a little kid going around it. I thought that was the most amazing thing I'd ever heard. And I think what I responded to is that it was so astoundingly ordinary. And then after doing Diner and years later, and I'm listening to it, I went, that's where that comes from. You pick up on something. and it stays in your head, and that, to me, is taking that little moment that seems so ordinary and then making real ordinary dialogue have some significance.
I think I read, I'm not making this up, I don't think, that the studios, after you made it, they didn't know what to do with it. They didn't even want to release it.
No,
right?
no, no, I thought it was the worst thing they'd ever seen. They thought, in fact, I remember saying to them, I said, it's not like it's in a foreign language. I mean, it's in English. It is in English, because I'll never forget. He said, well, you got a lot to learn about editing. And I said, well, I guess I do. I said, well, give me an example. He said, well, he talks about the roast beef sandwich. He's going to eat the roast beef sandwich. As soon as he say you're going to eat the sandwich, cut. And then get on with the story. And I said, well, that is the story. And there was not that understanding of that tells you as much as you need to know about the behavior of these people and their relationship. Because he's saying, you know what he wants, yeah, but why can't he say it? So we don't sit around and say, how long have we been friends? What is it, 8 years, 10 years? People who are really friends never talk about friendship. It never comes up. And so you have to figure out how to talk about all of the minutia that we talk about. That seems that a lot of times there is hidden anger, there's frustration, there are all of these things that don't come out straight.
But you can't do that on a stage, can you? You can't do the roast beef sandwich on a stage, or can you?
I was like, oh. Wah, wah.
You're just in previews now. There's plenty of time to work these things out. But I mean, it goes back to what Sheryl said at the very beginning. She said, Barry, nothing happens. What do we musical? What's the story? How does that work? Or, is that something you confronted, or you're not, how has that been dealt with?
Well, because actually nothing happens, but a lot happens. Which is what happens mostly in life.
Yeah.
And in that, it opens the door, I think, for Sheryl's songs, to take that next step.
I mean, I'm not saying that there are whole plays set on a park bench. I mean, you don't necessarily have to create
but you
frenzy.
think about it. You say, so what is Oklahoma about?
Right.
They're going to go to a dance. Right?
Yeah. Well, they do.
I think that's sort of what it is.
Yeah, but they lasso.
Going to the dance,
Yeah.
So it's it's a fairly small thing, even though it's Oklahoma. It's
Yeah.
a big. It's a big title.
Now you're taking a job away from me, basically. Do those guys? Have you kept in touch with the people who are basically the diner guys? Or the composites?
Well, I mean, I actually spoke to the real Boogie just the other day, and I talked to some. Unfortunately, over this time, I mean, there was a very close friend of mine, Chip, who really kept all of the guys together. He was connected to everybody, so he was the glue that kept all of these different groups together. And he died a few years ago, so it sort of spread out. But I'm friendly with some. But there used to be, for a 10, 12-year period, and once a year they would meet and have a weekend. And I actually filmed them over like a 10-year period.
Wow.
But I've shown it only a few times. But
you could do a sequel, Nursing Home.
So I have that, and I don't know what I'll ever do with it.
That's really cool.
It's interesting.
That's really, really cool. So was it fun to do this?
Yes, I think it was. I think it was
so far.
Yeah, I mean, well, look, I mean, not so far. I mean, I think it's great because there's something about a learning experience that I think is really exciting. Where you're suddenly stepping into where you haven't been, and you go, all right, well, let's see. And you say, well, are we going to go to Broadway? I don't know. I mean, I have no idea about anything. All I know is, like, we put something together, something that was very different from the way I've worked. Sheryl and I, talked about these elements and how do they fit, and et cetera. And it's all very new. And that in itself is worthwhile.
Plus, I think, when you've been doing what you know best for 25 years, it's great to do something you're not really exactly sure how to do.
Yeah.
It's what Barry was just saying about the learning thing. It has been interesting, though, in that when we first kind of got on board to do this, both of us were saying, well, how long does it take to do something like this? Like, get it up in a year, whatever. And we're right at the three and a half year mark. So there's a lot that happens before you actually ever get to where we're at right now on this stage, just doing previews. And
But there was also...
there was some things along the way that we couldn't have possibly known because we aren't Broadway people. So now, should we ever do it again?
Well,
should we ever adapt Tin Man to Broadway? You heard it here first.
It's a whole continuum. But we should mention, and you alluded to this, Sheryl, when we spoke. There was a sense of like people, you wanted more input from people than maybe the people around you wanted to allow you to have from theater people who might have been able to help you. But the point being that this was announced for Broadway in April of, it was supposed to go to Broadway in April of 2013, no? I mean, there was a point at which this show was considered farther along than maybe was realistic. I mean, what exactly?
Well,
I was just going to say, the business side of it and the artistic side of it are two totally different things. And where we thought we were in relationship to having the people that were in the business side of it, not knowing them very well, and certainly not to put them down, our relationship with them was not what we're used to. I mean, we have talked about every aspect of the movie. I think we just want to know, and have always wanted to know, okay, so what do we do next? How can we make it stronger? And when you have people who are sort of making the business decisions that impact at what speed you're going, you're a little bit at the mercy. We originally, there was a bubble around us that said, don't talk to Barry and don't talk to Sheryl because he's Barry and she's Sheryl, and they do what they do and they
leave them alone.
I don't think either one of us were ever so precious, about it. We just wanted to make the best, beautiful, authentic rendition of Diner.
So at that point, did you put the stops on? Did you guys put the brakes on it and say we're not ready for this?
No. It had to do with, as she was saying, business things which we didn't know, where they were going to do things, and business-wise, they weren't prepared to do the things they needed to do as you take things along. So what happens is, when they announced it, and then there was a delay, and then the money wasn't in place, or what all that stuff is. So what happens was, we went through a period of where we weren't doing anything. So it wasn't like the material, we couldn't, continue to progress because those things weren't all in place.
It's interesting.
And it's an area that I still don't quite understand in terms of Broadway. So
it's also, I mean, it's for a person, I don't know what that is, having your access to a world of people. I mean, there are so many people who want your attention, and who do you trust to advise you on a project like this? How do you find the right people? I mean, even if you're sophisticated people in the entertainment business, it's not an easy thing to figure out.
No.
Well, sometimes you wind up with the wrong people to get yourself to the people that that wind up ultimately being your allies. Our thing is he's from movies, I'm from the music world, and you have interest from some producers, and ultimately, what winds up happening is that their expertise isn't getting something up from the very get-go. It's taking something that already exists and taking it on the road. They weren't equipped to do where we were at. And when the contract ran out, it was just beautiful timing that we got the producers that we have, and we're sailing, and it feels great.
That's great.
Yeah.
Did you both get a phone call one day and say, somebody said to you, Sheryl, Barry, we're going to Shirlington? And you were like, yes!
Shirlington?
Yes. I mean, who presented you with Signature Theater, which it wouldn't be embarrassing to acknowledge you didn't really know much about before you came.
First of all, let me just say that our music director calls it Sheryl. So
I'm from New York.
Obviously we heard of it.
no offense.
That's okay.
But we quickly found out that it was a good place to go to develop something where you can really work on the show and put it all together, put the elements together. And they said the facility was great, and it's a perfect thing. Which asking some people who knew about that said no, that would be a great venue to work on the production.
Sheryl, same. That was the.
Yeah, listen, Barry and I both have just wanted to see what we have, and it's as we've learned as we've gone that there's certain places in the country that actually have theater situations that nurture getting things up on their feet, where you can really see what you have and work out the kinks. And we had something else in place with the other producers, and when that fell out, that's when it became evident that wait, this isn't going the way we want it to. So when Signature came up with our new producers, we were elated just to really get it up on its feet and see what we have. And it's been beautiful to have it so close to New York as well. It's not like going to Chicago or anywhere else, because we've got great talent in our show, and it's been.
And you guys have been staying in Shirlington and walking.
Yes,
I love saying it.
Olympic Village.
Car, just walk up and
Right. You said exactly. Yeah. Johnny Rockets is right next door.
Got your Harris tweeter.
Yeah, Harris Tweeter.
I call that every day.
She doesn't tweet, but she knows
I
Harris
know.
Tweeter.
Harris tweeter.
Open 24 hours.
That's right.
They'll be thrilled. They'll be thrilled because it's going out the door. We have several minutes left, but Carol Merrill is thank you. We have some questions that people are tweeting to you guys. But casting. Did you have people, Barry, the first time around, you got unknowns, essentially. I mean, there were people with track records, in the business to some degree. They weren't film stars. Were you looking this time around for guys and women who would grow into the roles who didn't necessarily come with a big
We picked
name?
the entire cast from Shirlington.
It is the talent center of the universe.
Several of the checkout people, Twitter, was Beth, and amazing how it all worked out.
There's full employment in Shirlington.
That's right.
What that means.
In this thing here, because you're not going to go with real big names as happened with the film, you need. It's an ensemble cast, so you just needed to find the talent that you thought would work best for a musical.
And so these are actors that we won't necessarily.
That's right.
I think one of the actors was Spider-Man's understudy on Broadway. I'm sorry, I saw him.
I think so. I think our Fenwick might have been, and I think he was in Pippin. And
Oh, right,
yeah,
and Pippin too.
but
right.
I think he was the understudy for.
Spider-Man?
I think he was.
Was it fun to work with these young actors, or did it,
Still fun. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, they're liking the.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what I did want to know. So you're not the director. Kathleen Marshall is directing the show, who's directed Pajama Game on Broadway, Nice Work If You Can Get It with Kelly O'Hara and Matthew Broderick.
Anything goes.
But you're both sort of used to being in the driver's seat. Here you have to some degree accede to the wishes of a director. Has that been a difficult transition? I mean, or do you feel like it's the kind of exchange that allows you to?
Well, I mean, I think, I would have been foolish to say, I think I just want to direct, a musical straight out,
Choreograph it, yes. Choreograph it.
Well, I just direct a musical. So, I said, okay, do that. I mean, there are, obviously there are moments where you go, gee, I wonder if you can do this thing here, put that, comes up, I mean, you have these little things, but I'll whisper those things, to Kathleen at the appropriate time. But, this is her, show to put up on the as they say, the boards, right?
Very good. Very
I'd like
good.
to throw in one of those
Yeah,
terms.
you are Mr.
Picked up
Theater.
on stuff here.
All right, we're just going to take we're going to ask a few questions from audience and I think from the internet. But this is from @YellowJacket with no vowels towards the end. Cheryl, is there a role for you in the show like Sting in The Last Ship?
Well, funny you should ask that, Yellow Jacket.
No.
I told Barry, if there's any chance this thing looks like it's going downward, I am going to step in and play the mom. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I want to play
Don't do
Barb,
that.
but I'm too old. No, there is no role for me in it. But it is funny that I ran into Josh Charles when he heard about this. And I'm sure you guys know Josh Charles, very well-known actor.
From The Good
Very
Wife.
old friend of mine. He's from Baltimore. And he said, I will do anything. I will wash Barry Levinson's laundry if he will please let me play Fenwick. And I just looked at him and said, when I get to play Barb, you get to play Fenwick. So.
And didn't you say that when you wrote Tear Down This House that Ellen Barkin was in your head? You know Ellen Barkin, correct?
Yes, I've known her for years, and
You had like
I love her.
You imagined her singing the song when you wrote the song, didn't you say that?
I did, yes, I did. I imagined her in that scene in the kitchen, and coming out and having the conversation with Daniel Stern and him leaving and her just being left there, kind of like frustrated with her inability to stand up for herself, and it's good fun. I mean, I was handed an incredible just platter of these great characters. I mean, I got to write from the standpoint of Fenwick, who's so brilliant and who's just spinning out of control, and I mean, so many just great characters. So I got to get in their heads and write their experiences.
@DE Schrager asks, what scene or scenes did you most reluctantly give up, including in the script? Was there something you felt like you couldn't theatricalize from the story that you wanted to?
I don't think so. I think I held on to the essence of that which I thought was important to Diner. So I'd have to think about it, but I don't think I said, oh, that. I hate to give that up. I don't remember that.
Yeah, no, I think.
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
Was there any difference of opinion between composer and writer, scriptwriter, on musical moments in the show? Did you two have any clashes of any kind?
Not really.
I don't think so.
Well, we worked together on it. You know, I wrote the stuff, and then I'd come at him and say, "What do you think about this?" And sometimes he'd do like a little musical chiropractic adjustment, and he was really, really helpful. I don't know how it works with other teams. You know, I actually, in fact, asked Lon, who's our music director, I was like, does Elton come to all these things? You know, does he sit in the, you know, and how much am I supposed to be or not supposed to be, how much am I supposed to weigh in or whatever? And I don't know how it works with book writers, and I just knew that the people I was writing for, he knew best, and also just musically, it's been really, I've learned a lot. I'm not just learned a lot about what I do, but also different people, what they were doing back there, from Eddie Cochran to, you know, he's played me obscure stuff that Elvis did that I didn't even know about. And I feel like I know a lot about music and pretty, you know, dialed in.
Well, that's interesting that Barry had that kind of encyclopedic or, you know, understanding of the period. That must have been hugely
Yeah, it was
helpful.
very, very helpful. And I'm a bit of a musicologist anyway, and I love digging deep and learning and being informed, but it's also great when you have somebody who's really on that tip, you know.
I mean, it's, you know, because I can't talk in, you know, in the specifics of you know, the melody or the switch or the whatever or the bridge or the, you know, so, but Cheryl's very good because, you know, in my own inarticulate, so, you know, there's that thing when it didn't kind of has that because but when that other part comes into the thing, when it makes that, and somehow, oh yeah, I see what you mean. And
And if I go like this, is it? Yeah, okay.
so there was that. I mean, and sometimes Sheryl would say, you know, I said, no, I think it's pretty good. She says, well, maybe I should write another version, another melody. So I mean, so she was always open to play around with something or try something, you know, new. I think most of the songs continued. I think there were a couple that got tossed out only because we made some changes in terms of certain things early on. But
And then we had one song that was laying around, and then ultimately wound up. This is one of the centerpieces of the musical that just in the 11th hour was like, what about that?
yeah, they got back into it.
Yeah, when it wasn't even written for our character Fenwick. So it's fun. It's fun to see how these things kind of. We've talked so much about what Comedy Tonight, how.
How that evolved, supposedly.
Yeah,
Oh,
so
the funny thing happened with the forum.
Yeah.
The story, how he wrote it in Washington, Comedy Tonight.
yeah, like
That's where the song got written.
Yeah, the
After
story
it was-
I had heard, because I worked for Larry Gilbart, who was the writer, and he said it took like 15 minutes for a funny thing to wait for him to start to get the laughs. And they had this conversation with Sondheim that said, you know, we need something that tells the audience it's a comedy. We got to say it's a comedy. We have to tell them. We got to, so they'll know that they can laugh right away and not so and so. You know, get the comedy aspect of it with them. And supposedly, like according to Larry Gilbart, he said Sondheim came in. And basically, because he was sort of pissed off, he would go, something familiar, something peculiar, something that. A comedy tonight, and they went, fantastic, that's perfect. That's perfect. Now that was the story Gilbart
That's
told
not the story Sondheim tells.
Ah, that's funny. That's funny. Well, I like that story because I keep
It's a better story.
Good way through
stick with it.
previews. I'm going to walk in
We'll-
with like the showstopper.
We'll stick with
But
it.
you know what's so great about the form, and I've read a lot of things now about, you know, Broadway, and they were out of town. Rodgers and Hammerstein, and they're working, and it was this musical is called Green Grow the Lilacs, and they're out of town, and Hammerstein gets an idea. He said, you know, there needs a song here towards the end of the act. We got to I got this idea, this song, and they came back the next day, and it was called Oklahoma. And everybody went crazy, and they said, well, we got to call the show Oklahoma because of this song. But can you imagine being out of town, you're coming to Broadway, and I got an idea, the song Oklahoma. I mean, I love the fact that those things can happen, and that's part of stage.
So is there a diner? I mean, is there a song like that for you guys?
Okay, well, let me just say, there was about 3 months, or I guess probably like 3 or 4 months, where I'd text Barry, or I'd call, and I was just like pulling my hair out. The opening number, because we reworked it, and suddenly it was like, oh, now we need an opening number. And I'm like, how the fuck do you write an opening number?
Right.
And I actually used the word diner in it, and it got tossed.
Well, maybe too on the nose. I mean,
It
there
was, but it's like, what is it? What am I writing?
Well, you know, the other
So-
part of this is you're entering, you know, the musical is an ever-evolving, I'm not sounding like a teacher here, but the musical is a changing form. It's
Yeah.
not the same thing that it was when we were all kids and listening to them.
Yeah.
So you're jumping in at a point where there's a certain level of sophistication and about how a story is told, and it's a very different kind of animal, really, a modern musical done, you know, in a sophisticated way, I think. And obviously you have people involved. I don't know why I'm going on this long on this question, but
That is an interesting thing that you're talking about, because although you're trying to do something modern and something sophisticated, there are still tenets that exist in the Broadway music idiom that are impossible to steer away from,
Right.
or that are at least expected. You know, the way you end songs to make sure the audience knows when to applaud. Things that I naturally would say I would never do that.
Right.
Modulate a song,
Right.
never. You know, all these things you would never do, which are practically the foundation of Broadway musical scoring. So it's challenging.
Sting said, did I mention I meant Sting? He said, I was saying, you know, why is there's emotionality such an important part of Broadway musicals, and he went, oh, it's the augmented chords. And I didn't know, he said, it's the longing that, that's the difference. He said, rock, it's all these kind of, emphatic chords. And he said that, but it's the augmented chords of the musical that make you expect something else to happen. I thought it was a very interesting, I don't know, it's true.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that, listen, I think that, and he's a perfect example, I think what sets every artist apart are the intervals that they choose when they sing. I think what makes us feel certain things are the tonalities of chords. And if you're looking at it from an analytical standpoint, if you're, somebody who studies music, you know what to play to make somebody feel sad or to feel melancholy or to feel angry or agitated or joyful or any of those things. A lot of it has to do with, the note choices, the way a melody moves, and the tonality and harmonics of a chord. So yeah, he's right. But, ultimately, you do rely on the parameters of, what the musical is that sort of inform you as to what your choices are.
So, where, just briefly, so what's the fantasy for what happens with this show? Can you allow yourselves to think that to where this could go, or are you trying not to think about where this could possibly go?
You first.
No, to be honest with you, I deal with it on a day-to-day thing. We ran it only the last 2 days from beginning to end, which is the only time we've ever seen it like, oh, there's the whole show, as opposed to a piece and a piece and a piece and a piece, So, and now you say, well, all right, so now what happens when you add the element of an audience? Where are we then? So right now you're too involved in the mechanics of it, because it's hard to sit and you go, oh yeah, that sounds too low. I can't hear that. This is, so you're constantly dealing with that. So you really can't think of the future. You keep going, my God, we didn't hear the first two lines. You can't hear when you said the song. You can't hear the the guitar, the whatever. All of those elements that were as Sheryl was saying, she was trying to watch it the other day. So I'm just going to watch it, and then 10 minutes in, you start writing notes.
Well, I just think that the two of you come, in the recording studio, you are in control. On the back lot, you are the guy, and here you're just cogs essentially in this larger process. You're depending on a lot of people to pull this one with you through. I mean, it's a different and very. It must be a little nerve-wracking.
It's a different animal for sure.
Yeah. What do you think the guys from Diner would think of this musical, Barry? You think they would?
I think they would. I think it would be fun for them to see it, because it's very different. I mean, you have to take that next step, and I wonder for any of them, I saw Paul Reiser not long ago, and I told him, he said, oh, yeah, I would be singing. So I think they would get, and Kevin Bacon, I think the same thing, applies, because he actually does sing, so he probably would think,
that's right.
If I were only younger.
I know, yes.
Yeah.
More reason to do Nursing Home the musical. Well, listen, we're all excited that you're here. We're thrilled that we're going to get to see this musical very shortly, and I thank you for sitting and talking to us for this amount of time.
Thank you all.